All right, so let's jump right into this deep dive. Justin Trudeau, kind of out of nowhere, steps down. Big news, right?
Yeah, definitely caught a lot of folks off guard.
For sure. And I mean, the headlines tell us the basics, but we're going deeper here. We've got reports from everywhere: Al Jazeera, The Guardian, New York Times, even some international papers.
Always good to get those different perspectives.
Exactly. So we got to figure out not just what happened, but what it all means for Canada. Who's going to step up next? And, well, even what Trump's saying about it, because, of course, he's chimed in.
He never misses a chance, does he?
Never. Okay, so basics first. Trudeau's out as Liberal Party leader, Andy as prime minister, but he's not disappearing right away.
Right. Gonna stick around till they choose a successor.
Makes sense, avoids chaos, especially right now with Canada holding the G7 presidency. All eyes are on them. But the real question, the WHY. Why would Trudeau, who seemed pretty solid, suddenly bail?
Well, the articles are pointing to a whole bunch of factors, and it's not just a Canadian thing either. Seems like globally people are getting tired of the same old face as the establishment.
Yeah, like that throw the bums out mentality.
Exactly. And Trudeau's getting hit hard by that. His approval ratings are, oof, not good.
16%, according to Angus Reid Institute. That's got a sting.
It's their lowest ever. And then you got to factor in the pressure from within his own party. Chrystia Freeland stepping down as deputy prime minister, finance minister too. Huge blow.
Especially with that resignation letter she dropped. Ooh, scathing.
Yeah, not holding back. She basically accuses Trudeau of going for those flashy short-term wins instead of what's best for Canada long-term.
Wow. So even before this resignation, he's got popularity tanking, party fighting. Why NW, though? Why step down right at this moment?
Well, got to look at the election coming up. Articles are saying Trudeau's trailing Pierre, the Conservative leader, by a lot, like 20 points behind.
Yeah, and Poilievre, he's not exactly Trudeau light, right? I've seen him compared to, well, someone south of the border.
Let's just say he's on the opposite end of the political spectrum. More right-leaning, some even call him Trumpian. So it's not just an election, it's a potential huge ideological shift for Canada.
And that's got to have folks worried, right? Not just Canadians, but anyone invested in what happens up north.
For sure. A Poilievre win, it could ripple out everywhere. Social programs, environment, even how Canada deals with the U.S. Imagine you're a business owner in Canada, relying on those government green initiatives.
Poilievre comes in, those subsidies could vanish.
Exactly. So, yeah, for anyone listening who's thinking about, say, cross-border investments, this is huge EE to watch.
Okay, so we got low popularity, party infighting, a maybe impossible election, and all this international stuff on top. This is getting complicated.
It is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about stability, especially now with Canada running the G7. A brand new leader, maybe from a whole different party, having to prep for an election and deal with global issues.
And they'd have, what, just a few months to do it all?
Yeah, not a lot of time.
Plus the whole economic side of things. Canadian dollar's been shaky lately, and Trump's trade policies haven't exactly been friendly up north. What does all this mean for our listeners? Like, even something as simple as planning a trip to Canada.
Could get more expensive, for sure.
Yeah.
That instability hits the exchange rate.
Right. And for businesses tied to Canada, the uncertainty is a whole other level of headache. And speaking of headaches, we got to mention Trump, right? He can't resist getting involved. That post on Truth Social about Canada becoming the 51st state.
Oh, yeah, suggesting they just joined the U.S. classic Trump.
But is he serious? Joking. Just messing with everyone.
Who knows? It's always hard to tell with him. But it does bring up something interesting the articles mentioned. Apparently, Trudeau was trying to get Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada guy, onto his team.
Wait, Carney, the one who ran the Bank of England too? He's a big deal in finance.
Exactly. So what was Trudeau thinking there? Well, think about it. Bringing in someone like Carney, especially with Trump doing his whole unpredictable thing on trade, it's strategic.
Like Carney knows Canada A&D, the global scene.
Right. So he could have been Trudeau's counter to whatever Trump throws at them. Almost like assembling a super team of experts to protect Canada's economy. Shows you how seriously Trudeau was taking Trump's potential moves.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the why of Trudeau stepping down, but now the big question is, who comes next, T? That's where things get really interesting.
So we know W.A. Trudeau's out, but the big question everyone's asking, who's next? Who's going to take over the Liberals and maybe even become Canada's next prime minister?
Right, that's the million-dollar question. The articles throw out a few names, each one's got their strengths, but let's be honest, some baggage too. Chrystia Freeland's name keeps coming up. even after that whole resignation drama.
It's like that resignation letter was basically her campaign launch, right? Highlighting how different she'd be from Trudeau.
Totally. Remember that line about Trudeau favoring costly political gimmicks? Sounds like she'd be way more fiscally conservative, maybe appeal to voters who think the economy's not working for them.
Could be a good strategy.
Yeah.
But you got to wonder, could that outspokenness backfire? Alienate some of the liberal folks who are still loyal to Trudeau?
Yeah, it's a tough balance. Got to present yourself as the fresh start, but not trash Trudeau completely. But hey, she's got the experience, right? Finance minister, deputy prime minister, that whole NAFTA renegotiation.
She's had that, yeah.
Which, speaking of NAFTA, how much does that experience matter when dealing with someone like Trump? Especially if he starts those trade wars again.
Huge question. She's proven she can handle tough negotiations.
Yeah.
And for Canadians whose livelihoods depend on trade with the U.S., like those farmers exporting goods.
Freeland's ability to play that game well, that could be make or break for them.
Absolutely. So experience, check. Willingness to speak her mind, check. International know-how, check. But can she connect with everyday Canadians? Does she have that it's factor, you know?
Right, that's what it comes down to for a lot of voters.
Exactly. And she's often seen as more the intellectual type, policy-focused. To win, she's got to convince people she gets their problems, that she can deliver real results, not just fancy economic theories.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about Dominic LeBlanc? He's taking over Freeland's spot as finance minister, but can he fill Trudeau's shoes as party leader?
He's been tight with Trudeau for a long time.
Hmm.
But does he have the vision, the charisma to actually lead the Liberals to a win? Those are big questions.
He's known for being good at politics, bringing people together. Maybe that's what the Liberals need right now, with all that infighting we talked about.
Could be. But he's got to set himself apart from Trudeau, too. Show he's got his own ideas for Canada.
Right, so Freeland's the shake-up candidate. LeBlanc's more about stability, keeping things going. But with all the uncertainty in the world, the economy being what it is that going to be enough for voters who are hungry for change?
Tough one. Maybe he tries to appeal to the folks who are nervous about big swings, big changes, present himself as the steady hand. But he'll need a strong message to counter that momentum Poilievre's got, convince Canadians it's not just more of the same.
Makes you wonder if voters are even in the mood for more of the same from anyone, regardless of party.
Right. It's a whole mood out there. Okay, now for a wild card. Christy Clark, former premier of British Columbia. She's got that executive experience, but she comes from a more conservative background. Can she even win over the Liberal base?
It's a head-scratcher for sure, but I've heard people say she's pragmatic, that she can connect with voters on both sides of the aisle.
Maybe that's her play. Be the centrist, the bridge between Trudeau Liberals and Poilievre Conservatives.
Like, I'm not extreme, I'm the sensible choice.
Exactly. It's risky, but if it works, it could totally change the game.
So we've got Freeland, the one who tells it like it is, LeBlanc, Mr. Steady, and Clark, the maybe bridge builder. Wild mix. What stands out to you as we've been talking about them? Whose strengths really hit home, and whose weaknesses worry you?
Ooh, good question. Think about all those challenges we talked about, the economy, the U.S. situation, those divisions within Canada.
Yeah.
Who do you think is best equipped to handle that?
Exactly. It's not just about who sounds good, it's about their policies. What kind of Canada do you want to see? More progressive, more fiscally conservative, somewhere in between.
That's where you come in, dear listener.
Hmm.
You've heard the facts, the analysis, the what-ifs. Now put it all together. What resonates with you? Who do you think has the vision, the skills to lead Canada through all this? Think about it.
Okay, so we've talked about W.H.Y. Trudeau's step down, who might replace him. But now let's zoom out a bit. What does this all mean for Canada long term? It's not just one guy leaving. It feels like a bigger shift, right?
Yeah, definitely feels like the end of an era.
Yeah.
But it also kind of lines up with that global trend we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Voters just seem less and less happy with the establishment, the people who've been in charge for a while.
So is this a blip on the radar, or is it something bigger? Are we seeing a fundamental change in what people want from their leaders?
It makes you think, right? What does make a successful leader in this kind of world? It's not the same as it used to be.
Right. Like maybe it's less about being charismatic, more about actually getting stuff done, especially with the economy the way it is and all the division we see everywhere.
Yeah, and Canada's got its own specific set of problems right now, too. It's like the country's at a crossroads. The economy's struggling, people are divided, and then there's the whole U.S. thing, especially with Trump back in the White House.
Exactly. It's not going to be easy for whoever takes over from Trudeau. They've got a lot on their plate. Cost of living, political divides, and, oh yeah, figuring out how to deal with the U.S., which can make or break Canada's economy. I mean, think about it. If you're a Canadian family trying to make ends meet,
The new leader's policies on trade, inflation, all those things, it's going to affect them directly.
big time. And then on top of all that, there's the G7 presidency. Canada is about to be on the world stage, and it'll be a new leader representing them.
Huge deal. The whole world will be watching how
Hmm.
Canada handles things like climate change, the economy, all that.
Hmm.
And depending on who the new leader is, it could mean a big change in Canada's priorities, its alliances even. That could have ripple effects way beyond just Canada.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as all this unfolds?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay informed. Pay attention to what's going on and think critically about it. The political landscape is constantly shifting, and it's up to each of us to understand what's happening and what choices are being made.
Right, don't just skim the headlines, actually dig into the issues, listen to different viewpoints, and question your own assumptions.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't just something to watch from the sidelines. In a democracy, it's the citizens who shape the future. It's about being active, participating.
You got that right. Your voice matters, your vote matters, your choices matter. Don't forget that. Okay, before we go, one last thought. We talked about Trudeau trying to bring Mark Carney on board, probably to counter Trump's economic moves. That, plus his resignation, it makes you realize that even leaders who seem super secure, they can be vulnerable too. And they're always making these strategic moves behind the scenes that we might not even know about.
It really makes you wonder what LSE is happening out there that we're not seeing. What other political chess games are being played?
Mhm.
And how will all that affect us in the end?
Great point to end on. It shows just how complex and interconnected global politics really are. And it reminds us that we're all part of this story, whether we realize it or not. So, yeah, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.